The topic of tendon stiffness is one of those things that's perpetually doing the rounds on social media. But like any of these topics, the majority of coaches who educate on this topic are missing the forest for the trees and probably making this unnecessarily confusing for you. So in today's video, you're going to learn everything you need to know about tendon stiffness so that you never need to listen to anyone about the topic again and we can just put this to bed. And while I agree, it is important to understand what sort of training creates stiff tendons, but doing specific forms of training just to target tendon stiffness is honestly something I never think about when I'm training any of my athletes. Because this whole tendon stiffness thing is a great example of Goodhart's law. Stiff tendons are just one of those proxies we have for being able to do athletic things. But when the measure of a proxy is talked about more than the actual outcome or the real goal that we're chasing, that becomes problematic. And this is the situation we've gotten to where people are optimizing their training a little bit too much for tendon stiffness when really it comes factory installed with any reasonable training program. Lately, you've probably been hearing a lot of the experts on tendon stiffness telling you that the best sort of training you can do to stiffen up those tendons is heavy, slow resistance training. And they're absolutely right. But when you have a look at someone, for example, like Mike Israetel, who I think we can all agree has a pretty good public record of doing a lot of real heavy, slow resistance training, therefore we can assume he has some pretty stiff tendons. And ironically, his poor athleticism has been a running joke on social media for the last few years. So I'll ask you this question one more time. What do you care about, stiff tendons or being a better athlete? Before we get too much deeper in the video, it's important that we define what tendon stiffness actually is, because I think the definition of it that a lot of people run with is pretty incomplete. So when most people talk about tendon stiffness, they're referring to the tendon tissue's ability to resist deformation, and the more stiffness it has and the more resistance to deformation it has, the faster and harder it's going to spring back to its original shape, and propel you through athletic movements. And honestly, training for stiffer tendons, it's almost like fascia training. You really can't miss. There's really great research on both heavy, slow resistance training, but then also the complete opposite end of the spectrum with long periods of plyometric training as well. So some of the results for tendon stiffness with just plyometric training are a little bit disappointing if you only look at the shorter term studies, but over a longer period, it seems like it really is great for tendon stiffness. But it's funny to me that people are so obsessed with, oh no, how can we get stiffer tendons with our training? When it's like literally any form of training seems to give you stiffer tendons. Coaches just went crazy with it, especially once they saw that in these shorter term studies that the heavy slow resistance training was better for tendon stiffness. So many people just took it and ran with it and then just got obsessed with isometric strength training for athletes. And I just don't see, based on the evidence, why they jumped to that conclusion that we needed to go as slow as possible to get enough tendon stiffness, when it's like, no, but training as fast as possible still gives you great tendon stiffness. There's literally no need to do any isometrics for tendon stiffness. It's just normal bodybuilding training. It's phenomenal. It gets you really jacked. It's not as boring as isometrics. Your athletes are probably doing some form of heavy, slow resistance training already. Your tendon stiffness just comes baked into good training. Again, not that stiff tendons in isolation are going to do anything for your athleticism. Here at GPP, we look at stiffness in two different categories. Yes, it is just this property in tissues that can be developed, but it's also a coordinative property as well. So for example, your Achilles may have a certain degree of stiffness, but then the degree of either dorsiflexion or plantar flexion that you're in when you touch down on the ground, that is going to have a massive impact on the amount of stiffness that an athlete demonstrates, for example, in an acceleration phase or in any phase of sprinting really. We often see a lot of misdiagnosis of people supposedly not having enough Achilles stiffness because their heels get too close to the ground when they're jumping or sprinting. I personally don't really have an issue with athletes' heels getting close to the ground when they're jumping or sprinting, but I would look at it much more as a coordinative issue than a tendon stiffness issue specifically in most cases. The difference in whether or not you focus on stiffness as being a coordinative skill or just a property in tissues is whether you end up being a good athlete or just like Mike Israetel. Hopefully by this stage of the video, you're starting to get a little bit angry at everyone's obsession with tendon stiffness. You're like, wait, if they really understood tendon stiffness, Why is everyone obsessed with it? Like, how could you miss tendon stiffness in your training? Tendon stiffness training is fascia training. Coaches trying to seem smart, athletes just doing the best training, just doing bodybuilding, doing a few plyos, playing a sport. Some smart S&C coach wants to overcomplicate it for them. They're like, oh, well, are you doing anything for tendon stiffness? And then athletes, because they look up at S&C coaches as these experts, are like, oh no, I didn't even think of that. Oh, I better start doing floating heel exercises. Oh, I better start doing isometrics. It makes me so angry. Let me know if you get that reference if you're Aussie. Bonus points if you're not Aussie and you get that. Sadly, what a lot of people do when they start obsessing over tendon stiffness is they just make their resistance training worse. This is just another example where I often get accused of oversimplifying something, but ironically, it's the average S&C coach not appreciating the rich complexity of just regular ass bodybuilding training. It's so good for bone density. It's so good for tendon stiffness. So good for just general, improving health outcomes with making more resilient athletes. But just looking at training through the straw of tendon stiffness, not that these coaches don't train for other qualities, but again, they don't realize how many boxes they're already ticking. And plyometric training has been the real loser in this whole tendon stiffness conversation because most people have only read the research on short-term studies saying that it wasn't as good for developing stiff tendons. So people are like, oh, what's the point of plyometric training? To actually make you a good athlete, to actually get you out of Mike Israetel purgatory. It really is as simple as that. Plyometrics, like every other form of training, yes, they will eventually make your tendons stiff, but the more important thing is they make you more athletic. Bit of bodybuilding will make you more athletic as well, but plyometric training will make you so damn athletic because it is just athletic. Plyometric training also helps you develop stiffness in the most important part that no one's focusing on when it comes to stiffness, the muscle. Makes me so angry. Just another reason to forget about tendon stiffness altogether. There is a journey that I have gone on as a strength and conditioning coach that a lot of other coaches unfortunately stopped halfway through, and it goes a little bit like this. Initially, I thought bodybuilding training is for the muscles and plyometric training is for the tendon. Most coaches never go beyond that, and that's why they end up overcomplicating their training. In reality, bodybuilding training is for your muscles and your tendons and your bones and your ligaments and your fascia and every part of your body. Plyometric training, not just for your tendons, also for your muscles and your bones and your fascia and all your connective tissue. But if you do want to zoom in, that is the difference between someone who has just stiff tendons and doesn't have the stiff muscles or the coordination of the whole muscle tendon unit. It's this athletic training that develops this rapid contraction ability in your muscles, and the more rapidly they can contract and stiffen up and yank and deform that tendon to get all these elastic responses. That's what you're missing just with your heavy, slow resistance training. In all likelihood, the best and worst athletes you know, provided they are doing heavy, slow resistance training, have very similar tendons. The main difference is in their muscles. I still don't think it's worth just shifting where your little straw is at if you're just still looking at training that simplistically, because we don't want to look at plyometric training as just training for our muscles, because again, it's interacting with the whole system. I'm telling you, understanding complexity properly is the linchpin for properly understanding every other component of training. If you want to understand complexity and its application to training, check out GPP level 1. All right, that's enough for today anyway. Hopefully you have a greater understanding of tendon stiffness, and hopefully you are no longer interested in the conversation online about tendon stiffness, because you understand that it's just factory installed in good training. You don't need to worry about it. If anything, worry about stiffer muscles. If you like how we talk about things here at General Physical Preparation, you can hire me as your coach. You can hire me as your mentor and educator. There's links for all that stuff down below. This has been an absolute pleasure, and I'll catch you soon with another video.